Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name and Hearthstone is the game, and these are 5 cards that have been brought back to life due to the Kobolds and Catacombs expansion meta. You know, cards tend to fall off, some cards never have any popularity in constructed format at all, but when new cards are released, when new decks come into shape, some of those older cards, those forgotten cards, those never utilized cards can be brought back to life, can come into the meta in a big way and start making an impact. And those are the exact cards I'm going to feature in this list. Now keep in mind I can't highlight every single card that has seen a slight rise in popularity, so I narrowed in on 5 of the biggest risers based on data from hsreplay.net and the card's popularity in the meta, so that guided this video. If you're curious, you'll see some of those stats as I focus on each of these cards. So let's go ahead and jump into this list. Up first, we have our old friend, the Knife Juggler. This is a card that used to be played a ton across all kinds of aggressive decks. Then he got nerfed from 3 damage down to 2 damage, and Knife Juggler pretty much disappeared since then. As you can see from the chart below the card image there on hsreplay.net, not a card that was seeing virtually any play leading into Kobolds and Catacombs. But since the release of the expansion there in early December, you can see Knife Juggler's popularity steadily rising, and it's still peaking right now, primarily because of Knife Juggler's inclusion in the new aggro paladin archetype and its power with things like Call to Arms, the new Kobolds and Catacombs card specifically. Pulling Knife Jugglers out of your deck for free is fantastic because they even activate their effect if they're pulled first and other minions follow them, and that Call to Arms giving you often a couple free pings. Not to mention, of course, that deck can just summon a ton of stuff onto the board very, very quickly from Call to Arms or Lost in the Jungle, so Knife Juggler pings end up adding for a lot of damage both to the opponent's face, but also sometimes helping to clear those early boards and helping you stabilize your board of stuff. So Knife Juggler is pretty much the perfect fit for that deck, and honestly one of its stronger cards because it synergizes so well. And Aggro Paladin right now is pretty much the best deck in Hearthstone, arguably, and it's seeing more and more popularity on the ladder, and that's why this card's popularity chart continues to grow, and it seems like it's going to for a while. Even in its nerf state, Knife Juggler is once again one of the better cards in Hearthstone, and that's a pretty crazy thing to see. So up next is a card I never expected to see on a list like this. It's Mind Control for Priest. A 10 mana spell like this is so hard to play in Constructed Hearthstone. Mind Control's never really seen play in Constructed since it got nerfed a long time ago when it used to be a much cheaper card at 8 mana. But at 10 mana, it's just always been too slow, and maybe it would be a one-of very occasionally in some very control-heavy priest lists, but that's not something we've even seen in a very long time either. So this card is, as you can tell from the chart, pretty much all but forgotten until a little after the Kobolds and Catacombs expansion release when a deck called Satellite Priest by a guy named Satellite started to show up, and suddenly you realized Mind Control in combination with the cards Spiteful Summoner and Grand Archivist, these sort of 2 big neutral spell, big spell guys that are both neutral cards, I should say. Both of those together work so well with high-cost spells that they make their way into decks, and Priest has 2 in particular really good high-cost spells in both Mind Control and Free from Amber. So now Mind Control is suddenly worth running, and Satellite Priest is a list that's gaining a lot of popularity. You can see it's starting to tail off just a little bit here in the last few days of the meta, but still very strong, high-tier deck that you should expect to see some play of in the future as well. So Mind Control, since you don't actually have to cast it in this Satellite Priest archetype, that makes it so much better. You don't usually have to spend 10 mana. It's a passive benefit because it works with your Spiteful Summoner to give you those free Deathwings from time to time, because Grand Archivist will cast it for you for free and steal something from your opponent. That makes the card so much more efficient and less of a risk to run for those high mana cost spots. So Mind Control suddenly here, and I'm glad because as you could tell from this artwork, it is hilarious. I never knew the dude who's getting mind controlled, his face was so funny. You can't quite tell that on the card art, but his face is hilarious, so I'm happy that this one made the cut. Up next, we have the rogue card Deadly Poison. Now, it would be a mistake to say that Deadly Poison had never seen play. This card has, from time to time, seen some play in Hearthstone in the past when more weapon-based rogues were possible. But lately, as you can see from this chart, Deadly Poison just didn't make any sense leading into Kobolds and Catacombs. But with the release of the card Kingsbane, suddenly weapon buffs make a lot more sense. They're more efficient. They stack multiple times because you're playing multiple Kingsbanes. You're getting way extra value out of what was in the past pretty slim value from just a mere 1 mana card. So Kingsbane empowers things like Deadly Poison and Leeching Poison as well. But you'll note that based on this trend line of the popularity of this card, it's already losing some steam. It has seemed to stabilize just a little bit, but you could see the period where people were testing Kingsbane a lot at the beginning of the expansion, and Deadly Poison saw a ton of play, and it has since leveled off as we realize Kingsbane maybe isn't a class-defining card just yet. Some people are still including it, certainly, and still playing decks with Kingsbane, and Deadly Poison is being played alongside Kingsbane, and it looks like it's gonna stick around at least to some extent, way more than it used to be, which was practically unplayable leading into the expansion. But now seems like it's a card that's going to be more of a staple for Rogue, maybe not in the highest tier decks, maybe not even in those Miracle Rogue lists or in the Tempo Rogue list, but some sort of Kingsbane Rogue or a Mill Rogue looks like it might stick around, and Deadly Poison is a card you can expect to see more of in the near future. And of course, as new expansions come out and there's more support for Kingsbane, presumably this card could become even more popular in the future. For my next card, this one's a little bit surprising because I don't think this is a card that ever totally went away. Netherspite Historian has kind of hung around on the fringe of playability because, of course, this is a Dragon Synergy card, and Dragon Priest in some form or another has always sort of been part of the meta. Clearly in the mean streets of Gadgetzan era about a year ago, the card was really playable when Dragon Priest first came onto the scene and started to be a dominant higher tier deck. Netherspite Historian was everywhere because that deck liked to run it. But then it has steadily kind of lost popularity since then as Dragon Priest lost influence in the meta with the last few expansion releases. But here with Kobolds and Catacombs and the release of some really powerful new Dragon Synergy cards for Priest, namely the Twilight Acolyte and really namely the Duskbreaker, suddenly Netherspite Historian makes sense again and Dragon Priest makes sense again. So Netherspite Historian, as you can see there from this chart, is gaining a lot of popularity. People were testing it out at first, got a little bit of popularity from Dragon Priest. Satellite Priest, I think, bumped it up another level because that's a deck that runs dragons and dragon synergies to give you early to mid-game bodies and clear because you can't run lower cost Priest spells. So there's been kind of a tiered approach to this card regaining its popularity. Now this card is going to be rotating out of standard format pretty soon in the next expansion release, so I think it's cool that Netherspite Historian essentially got one last hurrah, and it's going to be interesting to see if this card is fundamental to Dragon Priest's success or if it's the other way around and this card is just only good because Dragon Priest exists. I don't know if there's a consistency balance that has to happen with Netherspite Historian. I know personally I've used Netherspite Historian sometimes to get a second dragon to activate the only other dragon sitting in my hand, and that's been a pretty powerful and important way to increase the consistency of those dragon activators. So I'm a little worried if Netherspite Historian falls off, it might end up hurting the archetype pretty significantly. It might be more than just an accessory piece of the puzzle, but we'll have to see when standard format rotates, because for now, this card is bundled pretty tightly into that Dragon Priest package, and it looks like it's going to be successful throughout the course of the Kobolds and Catacombs meta. And then finally here I have one last card. This is another one that is tied inextricably to Aggro Paladin. This is Divine Favor, and you can see the chart on this card is almost identical to the popularity chart we saw for Knife Juggler, because both of these cards are all about being played in that Aggro Paladin deck, which continues to gain momentum and continues to gain popularity on the ladder. It's starting to show up everywhere as people realize it's probably the strongest deck in the game right now. And of course, aggro decks are great, efficient ladder decks as well. So it's an obvious deck for lots of people to play as they turn the corner on goofing around in the expansion and start looking to actually rank up and finish the season at their desired rank goal for the expansion. So Divine Favor, again, still peaking in popularity. This one might go up even more. And I have to say, I'm not really thrilled about it. I kind of hate playing against Divine Favor. Of course, it is fundamental to the deck's success to be able to reload once they empty their hand, but it feels kind of punishing to play against in a lot of ways. I'm not sure it's a healthy card necessarily, although admittedly a very strong one, a perfect fit for the deck. So a card that's going to stay in Aggro Paladin for now, it looks like, and a card that you'll be seeing more of in the meta right now. As long as that Aggro Paladin deck is a success, Divine Favor's popularity is going to stay this high. So a little sad to say, but this card has unfortunately been brought back to life in a pretty major way. And that wraps it up for this list. Those were the 5 cards I identified as the 5 cards that are gaining the most popularity, that have been brought back to life in the biggest of ways. These are 5 cards I wasn't expecting to see again anytime all too soon, but here they've jumped a ton, seeing more play than half the cards in Hearthstone at this point. So all that said, if you guys have any thoughts, comments, questions, other cards you think they left off this list, reactions to these cards, of course, leave those in the comments below. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, game on.